Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So we've got a provincial election coming up in June of this year. And so I wanted to reach out to some different people that I think will make extremely good candidates, if not members of provincial parliament to represent us in the legislature. And I had recommended from a friend of mine, Qadira Jackson. Qadira Jackson is running in Scarborough for the nomination. And obviously, if she wins that nomination, then for provincial parliament. She attended York University, where she got a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, and then she got a Special Honors Bachelor in Social Work, a postgraduate certificate in Dispute Resolution. She completed a placement at the Children's Aid Society and another at the Women's Abuse Center. And then she went to law school at the University of Windsor, where she was actively involved in many initiatives, sat on the executive board of the Black Law Students Association of Canada. She's involved in activism at the University of Windsor, and then she became a lawyer. Quite the background. Why would you want to give all that up and now run for politics?
Well, it's a good question. And, I like to tell people that I'm not doing it, for a career. I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I grew up in a family that was altruistic. My family ran a foster home. We had over 150 kids living with me over the years.
What? You had 150 kids living with you?
Not at the same time, of course.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, like since I was 11, I shared my home with hundreds of children. And I think that, seeing how my mom interacted with them and giving back to the community kind of helped me to imagine myself doing the same. In fact, my mom was a social worker before that, so I followed in her footsteps with social work as well. So that's part of the reason why I decided I wanted to get involved and to give back to the community.
And you've been practicing law in labor law with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, I understand.
That was my articling placement. I actually have my own practice now.
Oh, okay. And are you continuing in labor law or in other areas as well?
I'm mostly focused on real estate right now.
Because the real estate market's on fire and there's lots of demand.
Well, not only that, I think that it helps right now to have a little bit more work-life balance as I'm running. So I've kind of limited it to only real estate right now because it's better to, predict how things are going to unfold.
And you're also involved in something called the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers?
I was on the board for quite a few years, and it was nice to be on the board because I looked up to a lot of those lawyers as mentors when I was a student. So I went right from the Black Students Association of Canada to the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, like right away. So, it was great to be involved, and I got to sit at the table with the treasurer of the Law Society and discuss issues and and we would work towards expressing ourselves and advocating for our community within the Law Society.
And I understand when you were at Windsor, you were part of a group called Students Against Anti-Black Racism, and you spoke on panels against racial profiling.
I did. It was really
about, you seem to have gotten into a lot of things that are about children and foster homes and poverty, and then also a lot of things about racism. Clearly, minimum of two real interests of yours.
Of course. It's my lived experience. It's not just a hobby or an interest. I have, I look through the social context of my life when addressing these issues, and it's something very personal to me, and something I will continue doing. In fact, right now, I'm on the Anti-Racism and Discrimination Exploratory Working Group with the Professional Engineers Ontario. I'm a counselor, but we also have that working group that I made sure that I joined, and believe it or not, I undertook to be on that working group after deciding to run because it was that important to me.
And what do you think you can do to change things as a MPP?
Well, as I said, having the lived experience is important because I think that it makes you a better advocate when you really, really understand what people are going through. And, I have a very unique background. I didn't come from means. I lived in subsidized housing. And when I knock doors in the subsidized housing complex, people can identify with the fact that I've lived there, and they entrust me, and they know that if given the opportunity, I will advocate genuinely because I've been there, because I understand, because I've experienced.
We're chatting tonight with a candidate for a provincial election. The riding that you're running for is Scarborough Southwestern?
That's Scarborough Southwest.
Scarborough Southwest. It is, I apologize. How do I pronounce your first name?
Qadira.
Qadira Jackson. Qadira Jackson, who is running in Scarborough Southwest for the Liberal nomination and hopefully for the Liberal Party in the upcoming June election. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Qadira in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Qadira Jackson. She is a candidate for the nomination for the provincial Liberal Party in Scarborough Southwest in the upcoming provincial election. And you talked, Qadira, about your lived experience, and it's really quite interesting. I think that in the last year and a half, particularly after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, St. Paul, everyone's become a lot more focused on anti-Black racism. Clearly you've been focused on it a lot longer, and in reality, we all have, but it really became far more newsworthy, noteworthy, and top of mind after that. Tell me, if you could, how that impacted you, if at all.
Well, I mean, it was hard for anyone to watch, but as I said, having had lived experience, I was born and raised in Canada, and I can tell you that I've still had many incidences stemming back from when I was a child before I could even understand what racism was. You just don't understand why your teacher is treating you differently, or why every time you get in a fight with someone at school, you're always wrong. And so these are things that I had to navigate from a young age before even understanding what they were. So it's part of the reason why it's so important to me to give back. And when George Floyd happened, obviously we were devastated, and to watch that, it's just horrifying. I guess the only good thing is that it brought awareness to organizations that already existed, and to the issue in general. I'm one of the founding members of the Black Opportunity Fund. And this is an organization that was started before George Floyd. And, we've been working really hard, engaging the community. We have town hall meetings, and we're working hard to empower the Black community and entrepreneurs. And it's something that's ingrained in me. And I think that I will always be a champion for anti-racism and discrimination.
Is there systematic racism in Canada?
Most definitely. And anyone who says they're not, I'm sorry, but I've lived it. And, if you say that it doesn't exist, you're calling me a liar. I've been there. And a lot of times it's hard to explain. It's hard to prove. But when you see a pattern, and when your friends have the same stories, and, you realize that somehow the same thing keeps happening, there's nothing else that there's no other way to explain it. And I think that's how discrimination is. You can't prove it. It's basically just based on circumstantial evidence, really. And so I would say that 100% that is real.
You've got some kids?
I have two.
Are they teenagers or younger?
They're babies.
Oh, okay.
Actually, when I decided to run, I was holding a 1-month-old in my hand. And yes, it sounds crazy, but I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what God, the universe, all the messages coming to me are telling me to do. He is now 19 months old, and my other one just turned 4 on the 20th. I
interviewed a gentleman that's also associated with the Black Opportunity Fund a week ago, who told me that when their kids become teenagers, they all have to have the talk about how to navigate society as a Black teenager. Did you have the talk, and are you looking forward to or scared of having the talk with your kids?
I'm actually terrified of having the talk, and I think it will be confusing because you as a child, you grow up thinking that the police are heroes and they're amazing, and a lot of them are. But to have a talk with them about, you have to conduct yourself a certain way because, the people that you look up to the most can sometimes be dangerous, and not only in the police, just in any context. So I'm not looking forward to it, but luckily I do have a lot of time before I have to have that talk, given that my oldest one is only 4. But I think that for myself, my parents came from the Caribbean and they didn't really know to have the talk. So having been born here, I have the advantage of experience. And I will say that things have been changing in a positive trajectory. So I'm hoping that the talk will be less necessary by the time my children are teenagers.
Right. Just give our listeners, if you could, a sense of what the talk is.
I think most parents consider the talk teaching your child how to interact with police and telling them that, if they stop you, you have to make sure that your hands are in a visible place, that you have to make sure that you don't talk back, that you don't walk away, don't turn your back, things like that, because it can be dangerous for you. And, it's just based on experience, what we've seen, that sometimes when you're nervous, for example, if you're racialized and nervous, that police interpret that as guilty. And sometimes you're nervous just because you've heard stories. So it's just about how to conduct yourself so that they don't get the wrong picture, I suppose.
How else has systemic racism impacted you in your life?
Lots of stories. But I mean, I think that there's some positive changes as well. When I started with the Professional Engineers Ontario, where I'm a counselor, it's the regulatory body for engineers in Ontario, I was the only Black person, the absolute youngest, one of, I believe, 4 women out of about 25 people. And I was one of 2 who were not engineers. So, naturally, I was somewhat intimidated coming out and meeting everyone and thinking, okay, are they going to like me? I'm so different from all of them. There's a lot of people that don't look like me, and, thinking about, the old boys club and am I going to fit in? And I must say that I was pleasantly surprised. I was welcomed with open arms. And, there was one person in particular I thought didn't like me. Turns out he was just quiet, because my first interaction, he said, "I'm glad you're here. We need your perspective." So as much as I've had bad experiences, I've had positive ones as well. And I think that we are moving the needle a little bit towards the, a world with less discrimination.
One of the biggest impacts that I've gathered in my interviewing of different people and meeting and chatting with different people is not necessarily profiling, but streaming, which may be sort of like profiling, but that particularly here, our radio show is in Peel. There was a big criticism of guidance counselors and teachers and administrators in the Board of Education that they would stream all Black Canadians into general programs and not into advanced, and that they didn't get the encouragement that they needed. You obviously succeeded. You obviously, you've got 3 degrees. What is it that made you successful, and what do you think is streaming an issue, and what do we need to do about it?
That's a great question. And I think for me, I was successful in completing university because I had my parents as an example. My parents came to Canada over 40 years ago, and they had to go to school. My mom had to get high school equivalency. She got a college degree, a diploma, and a university degree because she worked hard. And my father also went to university. And so they set an example for me. I was expected to go to university. I knew that since a young age. And I think that's what was different for me than some people. I will say that I have a sister who was misguided by a guidance counselor. The guidance counselor asked her if she liked math, and she said no. And they said, okay, you don't have to take it, without asking her what her future goals were. And she wanted to be a veterinarian. So when she came home and told us, I'm going to drop math, we obviously were upset, because how do you guide someone without knowing what their goal is? So I would definitely say that streaming situation is real and it happens. I'm not sure how often it still happens, but I've heard stories about that. So I think for me, the best motivator for me was seeing it done, and following in my parents' footsteps.
What happened to your sister? Did she take math? Did she drop it?
She stayed in math because we made her, but she ended up going in a very different field. She went into, she has a degree and a diploma in journalism and broadcasting, and she was a TV host, and now she's a full-time actor and host. And, she didn't end up in veterinarian school, but at least she kept her options open, because we told her that was not good advice.
The percentage of Black Canadians in prison population is dramatically more than that in the percentage of the population. Why is that?
I mean, and there's probably many reasons for it, but I think that, when you are under more scrutiny, you're going to find something. And it's interesting because I actually took a course on racial profiling. And I think that in Windsor, it might be the only school that even offered it. And despite that, I wasn't going into criminal law, I thought that it would be very interesting to take. And they taught us how, to create a case on racial profiling. And as I said, it's all circumstantial. And, I think that if you're looking for something, you're going to find it. If you search 100 cars and you find one person who has drugs on them, what happened to the 99 people that you just traumatized and harassed? I think that, if you're looking for something, then you'll find it. So when you look at the stats of the amount of racialized people who are stopped and searched and questioned, with, the whole carding thing, we're all familiar with that now, you're going to find something if you're looking for it. So that's part of the reason I think that we're seeing that. I think also too that people inherently have biases, and whether you are a professional in, a lawyer or a police officer or a judge, those inherent biases come out whether you want them to or not. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of reasons for it.
If you're successful and elected to the Ontario legislature, what do you want to do? What are you going to fight for?
You know what? I think that one thing that's very important to me is childcare. And this is something that I said before the federal government came out with the $10 a day childcare plan, because I personally have 2 children in daycare at the same time. And I know how hard it is to find a daycare to fit both of them, to find a daycare at all, and to find one that's affordable. So that's something that's ingrained in me in terms of what's important for the future of our children. Education is obviously very important to me because I spent 10 years in school myself, and it's opened doors for me just, taking the step to go to university. I think that poverty is a big issue, especially in my writing, and food security is extremely important. I've been actively trying to support the Scarborough Food and Security Initiative in my writing. They've been doing great work in terms of talking about poverty and helping to give back to the community. And, I think housing is very important as well, whether it's renting or owning. I think that it's getting out of hand, and I think people are frustrated. People can't get into the housing market. I'm a real estate lawyer, and I'm seeing that a lot of people are people who already own houses. I'm seeing less first-time home buyers, and I think that's really hard to see. And, these are just some of the issues that are important to me. And of course, the Liberal platform is rolling out slowly, and we'll see more of what we're going to be running on going into the next election. But those are issues personally important to me.
What do you think you or the Liberal government, if it's successful in getting elected government, could do for housing?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that rental prices need to be more affordable, and we need a creative plan to help with housing. We have some programs like first-time home buyer rebates, and it's helpful, but when you're getting $4,000 or $8,000 back, but the housing prices are like all over $1 million, it's still very difficult. I don't have the magic solution in terms of how to make housing affordable, but I mean, maybe there can be some more creative ways of increasing the supply, or, maybe we can reduce the red tape in terms of splitting lots and making 2 houses on 1 lot. And
so the City of Toronto is currently considering proposals to do exactly that, to allow it easier to build, people call it granny flats or laneway housing and things like that. The Ford government, the progressive conservative Ford government, has used ministerial zoning orders more than any other government in history, primarily to almost overrule the local municipal processes and allow greater density, particularly near transit nodes and transit stations. And they justify it saying that there's too much NIMBYism in the local city councils and the councillors give into it, and nothing gets built. And we all know that we've got to build more, and we've got to build it near transit nodes. And so they therefore justified this sort of ministerial zoning order from on top. What do you think of that? Do you agree with what the Ford government's been doing in that regard?
I think it's about balance, right? Infrastructure is important, but at the same time, our green spaces are extremely important too. So, I mean, I think that you just have to find the right balance. And it's also important that you consult with people, because then you'll have the right answer. The right answer is what the majority of people need and will benefit from.
I think there's a huge development. I'm not sure if it's in your riding, but along the Golden Mile, I believe on Eglinton in Scarborough, that's going to take a whole bunch of single story retail and convert it into a, just a, I think it's 20 different towers of condominiums. Is that the right kind of development?
As I said, it depends on consultation. Like in my riding itself, we have quite a few low-rise condos, and people seem okay with that. But when they start trying to get 14, 15 and plus stories, and it's blocking their view and blocking the sun, and it's getting too close to the sidewalk, then people have issue with that. So it's all about striking the right balance. Definitely we need more infrastructure, we need more supply, we need more homes, but we have to make sure that we consult and we don't impede on people's ability to enjoy their life and their properties and their views. And, we also have to make sure that there's enough resources in place to service all the people moving into these areas, right?
What do you think the provincial government should be doing in regards to climate change?
I don't think I have the answer, but I think it's something that's important to our party. And, I'm not opposed to carbon tax. Again, I think it's important to consult with people and see what's in the consensus. And I think that our party is doing that.
The former Liberal government, Kathleen Wynne government, had a Places to Grow legislation and a big move where Metrolinx was going to expand with electric trains around the Greater Toronto area. The Ford government has kept that, but not as much, but has really invested a lot in number one, this Ontario line that's going to go from, I guess not Scarborough, but East York and down and then through the major downtown part of the city and onto Ontario Place. And then they've also announced 413 and the Bradford bypass. What do you support from a transit and transportation standpoint?
I mean, I think that building subways is more important than an expressway that benefits a limited amount of people. I mean, the 413, I don't think is a priority. I think that the negative outweighs the positive. And I think that protecting our green spaces is important. And I think we also have to look at who's going to benefit financially from the 413. And also, I'm seeing, I was actually on the subway on the TTC recently because, my car was snowed in and I got to experience firsthand what people have to deal with. And, we were standing on the side of the road and, I think that creating more TTC options in Scarborough in particular is more important than the 413. I'm glad that there are initiatives already and we're going to see more expansion in Scarborough, but I would focus more on getting people around in Scarborough.
What do you think of the Ford's government of handling of the pandemic?
I think the biggest mistake that they made was how they dealt with the elementary or with the schools. And I think that's going to be their downfall because parents are very upset. I mean, they sent them back to school without having anything in place to protect children, to protect teachers. And, with so much time that's gone by since the pandemic started, you'd think that they'd get it together by now, but they've sent kids back to school again without anything in place. Everyone's talked about HEPA filters and, they've increased class sizes right before the pandemic happened and did nothing to reduce class sizes and brought kids back to the status quo. And I think that that was the hugest mistake that they made. I mean, on top of that, the Ford government decided not to spend the money they received for the pandemic. They've also allowed, I believe it was $11 million to go missing. That was earmarked for families. And I think that in general, they have a failing grade, in my view.
What's going to happen in June, do you think? What's your prediction?
Well, I'm very much hoping that the Liberals win. We have a very competent leader. He knows his stuff. He's been around for a while. And, I think that we have some great candidates. We have a lot of diversity. We have people that are relatable. We have a lot of women. We have a lot of racialized candidates. And I very much think that the Liberals can win. And I very much think that my riding is a winnable riding. And I'm working very hard. I've knocked so many doors just for the nomination alone. A lot of people don't do that. And, I've knocked doors in areas that people don't expect to meet a politician. I go to subsidized government housing buildings, and I go to areas of new immigrants, and I think that we're engaging with this community, and I think that we have a very good chance of winning. Excellent.
Well, good luck. If people want to check you out, maybe donate to you or just check out your policies, do you have a website that they can go to?
It's my name, Qadira, Qadira, Jackson.ca.
QadiraJackson.ca. Qadira Jackson, who is a candidate in Scarborough Southwest for the Ontario Liberal Party nomination for the upcoming provincial election in June. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate meeting you and hearing a little bit about your background, which sounds very impressive. Your lived experience, both from a poverty and social housing standpoint, as well as from a systemic racism standpoint, and about some of your policy proposals. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Good luck in the nomination. Good luck in the campaign. And when you win the nomination, come on back and tell us a little bit about the process and what you're going to be fighting for in the campaign. Okay.
Definitely will. Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much. We're going to take a break and come back with another candidate in just a minute. Stay with us.